When we die, our spirit, our soul, separates from our physical body and goes either to be in paradise with God or in Hades to be separated from God. And then ultimately, at the end of history, when Jesus returns, we're united with our resurrected bodies, and we go through final judgment, and then we spend eternity in a very physical place, either heaven or hell. So I needed to know, wait a minute, what evidence is there that our soul does separate from our body at the time of death? Now, I was a skeptic about this thing of near-death experiences. I thought it was kind of new agey. I thought maybe it's explainable by oxygen deprivation in the brain, hallucinations, or whatever. But there have been 900 scholarly articles written in scientific and medical journals over the last 40 years on this phenomenon. This is a very well-researched phenomenon. And here's the thing. I was only willing to believe those things I could corroborate. You know, I wasn't going to believe someone saying, oh, I died and I met Jesus and he's 5'10", he's got brown eyes, really nice guy, got a great sense of humor. I mean, I don't know if that's true or not. I can't tell. There have been people who've made up stories and published books about things that they later admitted weren't true. So unless I can corroborate it, I'm not interested. Well, what I found, and I document this in my book, there are many cases that are corroborated. I'll give you an example. Maria, a young woman, dies of a heart attack in the hospital. She's dead. She's clinically dead. And yet, her spirit, her soul, her consciousness separated from her body. She watched the resuscitation efforts. Her spirit floated out of the hospital. And then when she was ultimately revived, her spirit returned to her body, and she said, by the way, there's a tennis shoe on the roof of the hospital, on the third-story ledge. It's a man's shoe. It's dark blue. It's left-footed. There's a little wear over the little toe, and the shoelace is tucked under the heel. So they go up and they look, and sure enough, it's exactly what she said. But I think what it is, James, is it's corroboration. Yeah. It's confirmation that this is true. You can't deny that something is going on there. There's another woman, 34 years old, from Atlanta, Georgia, had bleeding in her brain aneurysm. They had to do a very radical surgery. They cooled her body to 60 degrees. They drained every drop of blood from her head. 3 clinical tests showed no brain activity, 0 brain activity. Her heart stopped beating. Her breathing stopped. She was clinically dead. They put earplugs in her ear with 100 decibels of noise, which is the equivalent of a subway train going next to you. They taped her eyes shut. And yet, during the surgery, I was alive the whole time. So I watched the surgery, and then I went off, and I went through a tunnel, and I met some relatives who had deceased. I was in the very presence, the light of God. And then I returned to the body, and she said, by the way, there's a dent in one of the surgical tools that they were using on me.
Oh,
and she was able to describe these highly unusual, you wouldn't expect what they look in at. Exactly. Yeah. So she was able to describe the actual surgical instruments they were using. She had no way of seeing those. She recalled a conversation in the room where the nurse said, we have a problem, the artery's too small, and a male nurse said, try the other leg. She even recalled that the song Hotel California was playing during the surgery. Now, how do you explain this stuff unless indeed it is true that at the moment of death, our spirit, our soul does separate from our body? So I have maybe more than a dozen examples of people seeing things and hearing things that they would not normally be able to hear because of this. In fact, get this. One guy studied 21 cases of blind people, most of them blind since birth. And yet, during their near-death experience, they were able to see, many for the first time. Wow. One woman was in a car accident. She was in a coma. She was clinically dead. And yet she described watching the resuscitation. She described seeing flowers and birds and people for the first time. And then when her spirit returned to her body, she was blind again. Mm-hmm. And as one medical doctor said, this is medically impossible. One guy studied 92 cases of people who made verifiable observations when they were out of their body. 93% of those were absolutely accurate. Another 6% were almost totally accurate. So something is going on here. And I think because of the corroboration, it's safe to say that our body and our soul do separate at death. Now,